Okay, hey guys, welcome to another video. This is the first vlog for House of Night Book 1, Marked. For this one, we're going through chapters 1 through 6. So let's get right into chapter 1. Chapter 1 starts off with Zoe and her friend Kayla, and they're talking about this guy called Heath. He has apparently been drunk again for like the 5th time in a week, which I don't know how that's even possible. But Kayla doesn't seem to understand alcohol poisoning very well. Doesn't seem to be the brightest crayon in the box, because her exact words, she tells Zoe, look, he didn't get that drunk. You know, I think he had like maybe four, I don't know, maybe 6 beers and maybe 3 shots. And while I'm not too familiar with alcohol, I do know that different beers have different levels of alcohol in them, and depending on the shots that he took, he may not have been able to stand, especially after having 6 beers. So there's that. They have a brief mention about Zoe's stepfather, the guy she calls the step loser, and then Zoe spots the tracker, the vampire tracker, leaning against her locker. This tracker gives a very flowery speech about, you know, oh, I have found you, your destiny awaits, you know, come to the House of Night. And he marks her and she passes out. And of course she wakes up and her friend is crying, she's hysterical, which is pretty obvious, you would be. But Kayla, her hysterics seem to be more aimed at what other people are going to think, because her exact words are, you know, you can't be one of those things, you know. If I go to, I actually have the quote here somewhere. Here we go. You know, you can't be one of those things. You know, this can't be happening. Who am I going to go to all of our football games with? And that's on page 5 of the book. So that's already, you know, just wrong. And she actually Kayla takes the first opportunity she can to get away. So much for being, you know, best friends and all. And Zoe also explains that she now has 2 options. You either complete the change or you die, which is something I mentioned during the review for Marked as well. So yeah, that's chapter 1. Zoe is sick throughout chapter 1, which is kind of a thing that they also discuss her being sick for quite a bit, for a little while before the whole thing. But yeah, so her being marked already tells us that, just judging from Kayla's reaction and Zoe's explanation, that, you know, there was another kid that had been marked a little while ago and everybody kind of scattered. You know, he left the school and everybody got out of the way. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. So that already tells us that vampires are just generally not liked by the locals. Yeah, that's chapter 1. Let's take a look at chapter 2 real quick. Okay, chapter 2 starts with Zoe meeting Heath. She finds him drinking on campus, which he says, oh no, well, we don't have football practice because we won the last game. And, you know, frankly, I don't know how that equates to, oh yeah, we can drink on school campus, no problem. But, you know, Zoe, at one point, she starts coughing, and one of Heath's friends makes a comment, something to the effect of, you know, you need to stop smoking. And at this point, Heath proves himself to be an absolute moron. Because he outright says, she doesn't smoke, she's been marked, which of course causes a huge panic. She catches the scent of blood. She wants to feed, so Heath starts acting a little bit funny. His friends call her a freak, which causes her to kind of lash out at them and promptly scare the hell out of them. Not to say they didn't deserve it, but once that's done, Zoe sort of goes home, and the idea is that she's going to break the news to her mom, and she hopes that her mother is going to kind of say, look, everything's going to be fine, just stay calm, we'll fix it. And instead they get into an argument. Her mother takes one look at her and goes, what have you done? This can't be happening, what have you done? And they get into this massive argument about, her mother has essentially just not paid any kind of real attention to her kids for the last 3 years. Come to think of it, I'm not sure, but wouldn't that sort of count as child neglect? I mean, Zoe is 16. She has a brother who is apparently younger than she is, and she has an older sister, but there are no ages given for the other 2 siblings, so, but this whole argument ends up turned around where Zoe's mom basically says, well, let me just see here, how can you be so selfish? And she proceeds to list all the good things good things from her perspective that her husband has done for them, basically ending it with, we are financially secure, we have this big house, we're basically set for life, and you're saying that that's a bad thing. And so she's basically turned it on its head, kind of thing, and that to me comes across as just wrong. That is not something that you do when a 16-year-old kid comes to you and says, especially if it's your daughter comes to you and says, look, I need help, this thing happened, I need some help. You don't look at her and say, well, you're being selfish, what have you done? That's just, to me, that to me is straight up abuse, in my opinion. Now, if we move on to chapter 3, chapter 3 introduces us to the character of John Heffer, Zoe's stepfather, and he basically takes one look at her mark and he yells something about, get thee behind me, Satan, and goes on a rant about how, Zoe's a bad person. I knew you were going to be marked. It was just a matter of time before your bad attitude and your bad behavior caught up with you. That kind of thing. Which, again, that's abuse to me. That is psychological abuse. You are telling a 16-year-old kid who has essentially had her whole life ripped away from her in a day that she's a bad person. That's just wrong. You don't do that. And Zoe tries to explain the science about the vampirism and is immediately dismissed twice. Science isn't all-knowing, and God's knowledge is greater. and saying that scientists are smarter than God is blasphemy, except that Zoe never said that was the case. And even if she did, it's not possible to be smarter than a God. Or is it? I don't know. That's an open-ended question. I'll leave that to you guys. To me, it's just impossible. You can't be smarter than a God. They're all-seeing, all-knowing. That's kind of what being a God is. Now, Zoe's mother just is kind of standing there. Where is she? She's not doing anything. She's not stepping in and telling John to back off. She's not trying to interfere in any way. She's just letting this guy tear her daughter down, which, again, abuse. Hello, step in, please. And again, she doubles down on what she said earlier about the whole, we have this bright future. She turns to John at one point and says, what are we going to do about this? What are people going to say on Sunday at the meeting? And again, this is her saying, or her prioritizing her status in the community over her daughter's health. What kind of mother are you that you're going to do that? Seriously. So yeah, chapter 3 was just irritating to read. Let me just see here. Chapter 4, throughout chapter 4, Zoe basically makes her escape. She heads for her grandmother's farm and realizes she's now an emancipated minor because she's becoming a vampire, so she's not technically human anymore. So she's not subject to John's rules. And frankly, I think she's better off anyway. Chapter 5 sees her encounter ghosts, which it sounds weird, but bear with me. She encounters these ghosts. They scare the hell out of her. She falls, smacks her head, and has this out-of-body experience where she meets with Nyx, the vampire goddess. And the funniest part, it kind of leads to one of the funniest parts of the book, where she says, you're not my grandma. Like, really? Like, what gave it away? But then, Nyx kind of responds with, no, well, I'm not, but I know your grandmother very well. And Zoe says, or responds to that with, am I dead? Which is just silly. Nyx responds with, no, actually, far from it, you're just in the spirit world for the moment because I need to talk to you. And they have a little heart-to-heart. Nyx kind of tells her, look, things are changing. I need someone to be my eyes and ears. Guess what? You're it. And gives her a quick kiss on the forehead and basically tells her, look, just keep in mind, don't judge a book by its cover. Her actual words are, darkness does not always equate to evil, just as light does not always bring good. Which is just a fancy way of saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Chapter 6 is, probably the shortest section of notes. I've just got a couple of lines here. She wakes up at the House of Night, finds that her mark, her crescent mark, has been filled in, which is very unusual for a fledgling, because generally that only happens when you complete the change. She also meets Neferet, the high priestess at the House of Night, who, basically promises her grandmother that, look, I'm going to look after her, and to that end becomes Zoe's mentor, which is like a counselor, teacher, confidant type deal. We do get a little bit of exposition about what Neferet looks like, and we get this implication where her grandmother, she wakes up with her grandmother there next to her in the House of Night's infirmary, and they have this brief little moment where her grandmother talks about, I called your mother and told her that I was bringing you here. So I'm not exactly very popular with her at the moment, and I'd imagine that neither of us are really popular with her at the moment. And they have this kind of little laugh between them over that. But yeah, that's just a nice moment. And so I think at the moment Grandma Redbird is certainly one of my favorite characters. She just seems like an absolute badass. It's going to be fun to see what's going to happen next. So yeah, that's chapters 1 through 6. Final thoughts. The book is off to a rocky start. I said it during my review. When I reviewed the book last year, I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, and looking at these specific points, it is off to a rocky start, because now I'm actually looking at these specific points, and they don't sit well with me. That said, the book does get better, and I'm looking forward to discussing some more specific points as we follow Zoe while she starts her new life. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much everything. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this, the first of my House of Night vlogs. This was chapters 1 through 6. So we'll pick it up again with chapter 7 in the next one. And I'll see you there. Bye guys.